Welcome to the Introduction to SketchUp for Schools Part 3. We're going to be talking about the Tools bar, and by that we mean this little bar down the left hand side of the screen. We have a small separation here, and I'm going to cover that. We have a search box. This is new to SketchUp, but this is part of the Tools bar because it allows you to search for some functions of what you're going to be doing here. You might have a question or not know which tool you're going to be using, and you've got some context sensitive help. This little question mark here gives you some information about how to use this search bar. Other than that, the tools that we have here are designed for drawing onto the actual workspace, adding an element or some part to the model, or otherwise it's used for manipulating the model. They're relatively simple tools that are in use. The more complicated tools appear here on the panel. So we start with up here with a really important one. This is the select. You'll see that I have an arrow cursor at the moment, and that allows me to click and select various things. It is the basic tool that you want operative at any time. It means that you're doing nothing other than pointing and clicking. This one here is the eraser, and what you're seeing is that when you hover over it, you get a little tool tip that shows you what it is. This here is the eraser, so if I select the eraser, I can come and delete parts. Really useful tool. Okay, we'll go back to select. This here is the paint bucket, and you'll notice here that there is a little arrow here, and when I click on that arrow I get two further options, so two different ways that I can do the paint. This one here is to paint, and this one here is to sample materials, for instance. And this also opened up a panel, and it's the only one of these that does, but we will discuss that at a later stage. Over here we have the line tool, and we have a tool for drawing straight lines, and a tool for drawing curly lines or freehand lines. We don't use that very often. Mostly you'll be using straight lines. Here we have the arcs tool, and there's 4 different types of arcs, and you could be able to go through either other videos. There are many of them online that you can use, or I'll show you in the next, in video 5 I'll show you how to get some context sensitive help to explain what each of these does. But you've got 4 different ways of drawing an arc. Over here we have what fits under the rectangles or tool shape. We have the simple rectangle tool. We have a rectangle which is rotated or done at an inclined plane. This draws circles. This will draw polygons, and it will allow you to draw all polygons. When you select that, for instance, it says 6 sides, and if I wanted to change that, I'd simply type 8, and that would make it an octagon. So all polygons are possible from there. And here we have a text button. Now it's actually a 3D text, and it comes in an interesting way of grouping. There's some quirks about this, so I'm definitely not going to cover this at this time. Over here what we have are the outer shell tools. These are intended for 3D printing in particular, but they're intended for joining and cutting and separating different shapes. It means that you can intersect 2 parts, and you can either join them into one, or you can cut out and make sure that the 2 fit together, or you just take the remnants. Each one of these has a different usage. There is a really good video available that was produced by SketchUp, I think. I'm not going to tell you much more about it, other than that it is quite a useful tool, especially when you're doing some 3D modeling for 3D printing. This menu here is the move, and this one's very useful. Move tool is something you're going to be doing. You'll be able to select something and move it around the workspace. The alternative to that is rotate, and then this here that fits into the same menu is scaling for increasing or decreasing of size. As I say, all of these have their own tools or videos to explain their functionality. Over here we have a variety of tools that are around measurement. This one is a tape measure. It allows you to measure distances between 2 points, or to put out what are called guidelines, or in some cases to put a guide point. And you would normally do them at a fixed distance, and we'd be typing that. But this is a very useful method of doing this, because sometimes laying down a grid of points will allow you to then join lines in between these grid points as you need. Alright, a very, very useful tool, and one that I hope you get to learn, or hope you use a lot of. I certainly do. We have a dimensioning tool for just actually putting dimensions on actual drawings that we can see. We have a text tool which allows us to add labels. This is a section plane, and it's something that I really don't think you're going to be needing to use. It just happens to be here in amongst this section of tools. Strange enough, I think it should probably be up here. Oh, we've missed one. I'll come back to that. This here is a protractor. It works similar to the tape measure, but it draws lines at an angle. And here's an axis tool. There is a point at which you might need to change the axis, the origin and the axis for certain shapes. It's something that you'll very rarely do, so it just happens to be here. Let me just jump back up here because we missed the push-pull section. This push-pull is one of the tools you're going to be using the most. It's what allows you to take a two-dimensional shape into a three-dimensional shape, and that's going to be one of the tools that is most useful to you. This one here is called Follow Me. There are a variety of things you can do. You can make round shapes, basically cylindrical or circular shapes using the Follow Me tool, or otherwise you can take edges off solid rectangular shapes and other shapes like it. It's a useful tool, but not that commonly used. This is called an offset tool, and if you have a particular shape, you can actually create a identical copy of that, slightly larger or slightly smaller, with all the lines parallel. Again, sometimes a very useful tool, although it does have its limits. Down here we have tools which are called the Follow the Walk tools. This is intended for the architectural side of things, for walking through buildings and giving a person an idea of what they're seeing, giving them a good look at the inside of the building and the flow of the building and everything else. We do not need these at all, and I'm not going to tell you anything more about it because I just don't use them, and I doubt you'll need to either. You're welcome to learn about them. I don't think they're a lot of use to us at this point in time. Here we have a set of tools that are going to be very useful. Now, if you're using a mouse, the first four are already done by the mouse. The Orbit tool here allows you to move around and change your position and look at the drawing and shapes from different directions. But I can do that by using a mouse and just simply clicking down on my scroll wheel. I don't need to select my Orbit tool. If this one here is Pan, and that moves it sideways or up and down, I can do that with my mouse. I do have to use my scroll wheel, but I have to hold my shift key down, and that'll allow me to pan. So there is a small extra trick there to do it, holding the shift key down, but it's possible to do that as well. Mostly you'll find you'll use the Orbit anyway. This here is the Zoom tool, so once the zoom, I can click and I can drag towards myself to zoom out like that, or push in away from me to zoom in. But I don't need to do that if I have a mouse with a scroll wheel, because all I do is roll the scroll wheel and it does it for me, and you can see it moves relative to where the mouse cursor is on the drawing. The alternative, and especially if I have zoomed all the way out and I want to get in very quickly, the zoom tool can be quite slow, so what I can do is zoom around that there, and it just zooms into that space. It's a nice tool. Even with a mouse it can be useful. The one that is definitely useful at all times is this one here, Zoom Extents. Now, once again, I'm going to show you that if I've zoomed all the way out here, if I wanted to not zoom around here, but I just wanted to bring in, I can come here and I can click Zoom Extents, and what it does is it basically fits this into the window. Sometimes it makes it a bit bigger than you need it, and you have to scroll out a little bit, but this actually gives you this picture here. When you're working with three-dimensional shapes and you sometimes land up inside the shape and you don't know where you are, the Zoom Extents is a really, really good way of stepping back, seeing the whole shape, and then being able to manipulate yourself around it. I'm really not going to tell you much more than this, because there are videos on all of these tools that have been created by many other people, some by myself and some by others. I'll show you the usage in other videos, but there are definitely tools for each of these or videos for each of these tools, and you can go away and do that, and I will be providing you links to these videos in other places during lessons. What I was going to tell you though is that the tools that I find are most useful to us, that you need to know the most, is Select tool, Erase tool, Line tool. You might need to understand the arcs, but mostly this one up here and this one here, so the 2-point arc and the what's called interlocked plane or unlocked plane. Not so much the polygon, but the rectangle you will use a fair bit, possibly the circle. Polygon perhaps. Push-pull you will definitely use. Move you will need. Tape measure you will need. And certainly if you do not have a mouse, you'll become very friendly with the zoom tools, but Zoom Extents is very nicely. So the Orbit, Pan, zoom in and out, you're going to need to know if you don't have a mouse. Other than that, the Zoom Extent is useful for everybody. And that's all I'm going to cover in this video. And the next one, what I'm going to do is show you some shortcuts and some other little tricks of how to use the tools. Other than that, we're going to move on, and I hope to see you in that next video. Thank you very much.